Welcome to the Coach Debbie Potts Show, where high performers learn how to stop guessing and start aging stronger, not slower. Your host is Coach Debbie Potts, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, metabolic health coach, and host of this show. Here, we dive into the why behind fatigue, stubborn weight, hormone chaos, gut issues, and declining performance. Using real data, functional lab testing, metabolism analysis, and simple daily habits that actually move the needle. Whether you're an endurance athlete, an executive, or simply committed to becoming your strongest future you, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts. I'm the host of the show, talking about how you can be fit and healthy from the inside out as you age to create the FutureYou blueprint. As I hit middle age, really exactly middle age, 55, suddenly this November, I feel that I just turned 50 and I still say I'm 45. So reality check, I'm getting older, but I don't feel that I'm getting older because I am on a mission to embrace the aging process, not blame it, and understand what changes as we age so I can thrive and not struggle. And I've been doing different rabbit hole episodes with you to share with you what I am studying and learning and really fascinated by. This is a series talking about the communication in our body, the signals that change, and really my curiosity started going into the role of peptides and hormones in our body. We are learning about the language of human biology, something I did not learn in college when I studied exercise physiology, exercise science, and all my courses I did over the years of continuing education to become the health practitioner and coach that I wanted when I was struggling, because this is new information. What I'm learning about is understanding not just what signals we are giving our body, but what is our body telling us. And as I hit my rock bottom, so to speak, back in 2013, my so-called adrenal exhaustion, I was a high-performing individual running my own business, burning the candle both ends of the day, always going, on top of racing Ironmans in a competitive age group and level. And I wanted to win my age group each race. And I was doing that on top of being really stressed out all the time, trying to be successful as a small business owner in a competitive area and high rent. So financial stress was always there. And as I've spent the years healing my body, it's more understanding what happened to me and why do I see this happen to so many other people in different ways. The body gives different signals. So continuing down this rabbit hole, talking about the metabolic side of things, because your metabolism is communicating with us all day long. What I'm trying to understand is, for myself and for you, is are we listening to the right signals? Because most people think when I do their metabolism testing, their resting metabolic rate and their VO2 max, or I prefer to say your active metabolism test, people focus on the resting test to find out all they want to know is how many calories do I burn a day? How many calories should I eat? What heart rate zone burns the most fat? Is my metabolism fast or slower than it should be? But what I've learned from working with so many different clients is that this is only the surface. So when I begin to analyze data from, say, my PNOE, which is called PNOE, means breath analysis at rest and during exercise, I'm not simply looking anymore at calorie expenditure, because calories alone do not explain how efficiently your body is producing, how it's using, and how it is adapting energy. What I've become more focused on as a holistic health practitioner, FDN practitioner, nutritional therapy practitioner, metabolic health analysis, I'm looking for patterns, clues. I'm a health investigator. And I don't treat the lab results. I don't treat the test results. I am actually looking at how the body is producing energy. How is it conserving energy? Exchanging oxygen that you breathe in and carbon dioxide that you exhale in the body. So how fit and healthy are you at a cellular level? How do you choose to select fuel at different intensities? How does your body respond to stressors? And how do you recover from your daily stress of living life as well as your workouts? Are you adapting, or do we see signs and symptoms of that you are failing to adapt? All the signals that your body receives every day. And what I've learned from working with so many middle-aged high performers, similar to myself, is that these patterns are rarely random. The patterns are more a result of years of accumulated stress as myself, under recovery, inconsistent fueling, pushing through fatigue, ignoring those red flags, or we're clueless about them. All along, we are truly not understanding what the body actually needs in order to adapt and to thrive as we age. And these signals are coming much more from just your food and your exercise. As I keep sharing in many episodes, is that these signals are coming from our nervous system and our sleep, our hormones, our digestion function, our muscle, our blood sugar, thyroid. All these are different stressors that you've experienced through your own unique life. And this is why when I was struggling, I couldn't figure out why I had problems and the other teammates didn't have problems. Why do two people receive similar results in metabolism test, but they need completely different strategies? The number does not tell the entire story because it's really only capturing a single snapshot of what your body is doing at one moment in time. Same with blood work. It's a snapshot. When we do the fitness test, when you do your resting test, it's just right then and there. So the pattern reveals how and why your body is behaving that way, showing us the underlying trends, any adaptations, and the communication between your systems that are driving your metabolism. Now, this is something I'm really paying attention to as my mom just got a lung biopsy and they told her she has early stages of lung cancer. And then they're sending her to all these different doctors. Same thing happened to my dad when he passed away 4 years ago. He saw a heart specialist and a cancer specialist and a kidney specialist. No one integrated all these systems together. Hello, I don't know how your breath, how you breathe, is not connected with how well do your lungs function and your heart function, your blood flowing, as well as your kidneys, your drainage pathways. Your body works together, and we need to identify what's holding it back from being its best self to create metabolic harmony. This is one of the foundational principles of what I've created called the FutureYou blueprint. Health is a quality of the communication between the body systems. And I get so frustrated seeing how the medical system is helping people as my mom when they're aging, but they're not giving a team approach, integrate all these different experts, specialists together. Because, for example, as our topic today is on metabolism, it does not operate independently. Your brain is communicating with your thyroid. The nervous system communicates with your digestive system, where we are learning that the gut microbes are communicating with our own immune system. And the the hormones are communicating with our mitochondria. And our skeletal muscle, we have learned, communicates with our brain, with our liver, our bones, our fat tissue, and metabolism through compounds called myokines that we can do a whole episode on if you want. Now, your liver and your bile acids, I've been diving into because this is fascinating, how they communicate with our gut, our thyroid, our blood sugar, and energy regulating pathways. Every system is constantly sending, receiving, and interpreting this information. When the communication is clear, the body can adapt. We eat and the body knows how to use those nutrients, ideally, when we have the right environment. When we exercise, the body should know how to recover and become stronger. That's our innate intelligence. When we experience acute stress, the body will respond appropriately, then return to baseline. When we have good quality sleep, our body is healing and repairing. But as you probably know, as we get older, things might change and we need to do things differently because the communication starts to become disordered, delayed, overwhelmed, and the body begins to compensate. But what I'm diving into is the why behind everything. Why does this happen? What can I do about it? I am taking ownership of my health to improve how I age, so I'm not struggling when I'm 85 years old. The body is constantly trying to protect us and maintain balance, homeostasis. And when it perceives stress that's becoming chronic, remember, acute stress, good hormetic response is beneficial. But when anything is that leaky faucet, chronic stress, it accumulates. We have lack of resources, or maybe we're getting conflicting signals that shifts us into what I keep talking about, survival mode. And we need to preserve energy, and we need to prioritize immediate needs over long-term performance and repair. This is why I always look back at why I had what happened to me and let you know I never was able to get pregnant. My body was not prioritizing reproductive years. It was focused on surviving because I was doing too much of everything. So now we look back and we can go, okay, here is the signals the body was telling us. And now we can look at how can we adjust key metabolic pathways and hormone signals to match what it believes to be in the current environment. So when I look at people's labs and their metabolism test reports, are we conserving energy? As I say on the cell phone, when it's 5% battery left, it goes to low battery mode. So your body's conserving energy by lowering metabolic output. The body might respond to a stressor, raising cortisol, and help mobilize fuel quickly to respond from being chased by a lion. Or the body may become dependent on carbohydrates for faster energy access. Remember that kindling in the fire versus a slow burning log are those carbohydrates, they're quick energy. Perhaps we may stop building muscle very efficiently because we have reduction in the demands of energy. Others, we may struggle to access our fat in our body due to hormones and enzyme shifts. We might see a reduction in thyroid signaling, looking at your free T3 and looking at reverse T3 and seeing patterns that you have a slow response to overall metabolic activity. We might increase breathing and your heart rate because your body is perceiving a threat. So we have to look at all this together with the right intake forms. And this is where I start to see clues, data. Do we see signs and symptoms of fatigue? Are they struggling with sleep? Are they wired but tired? Is their workout session now a struggle? When I had obvious problems, I went for a bike ride that I was usually pretty strong on. I had to pretty much walk my bike home. I had no energy at all. Brain fog, anxiety, depression, feeling cold. I mean, there's a lot of symptoms. Feeling tired, but wired. Now, again, is your body actually just responding to the signals it is receiving? Because remember, our body's constantly interpreting the information from our environment and our daily habits. It is listening to the signals from your nutrition, from your stress management, your exercise sessions, your hormones, your sleep, your gut health, even your past experiences, which is why when I meet with a client, we go through their timeline from birth to today. What are some big events that have accumulated over the years that lead to chronic stress? So we look at all these signals and looking how the body now has to make decision. How do I use this energy? How much energy do I need to make? Or do I need to prioritize survival, repair, growth? Keep in mind, if you are under eating, overtraining, you're sleeping the minimum amount, you're living in constant chaos, chronic stress every day, you might have what happened to me. Your body slows down energy production. It starts to conserve fuel, and it reduces all of their functions as our cell phone in that low battery mode. What is not essential for immediate survival? If our blood sugar is unstable, or perhaps your digestion is impaired, you might have gas, bloating, reflux. Your body's perhaps relying more on certain fuels or struggling to access that fat for fuel. And if your nervous system is constantly activated, as we talk about the vagus nerve and sympathetic dominance, is it connected to your metabolism shifting to a stress-driven pattern that we'll talk about? So from the outside, you can show slow metabolism on a test. The report will show us some data, a clue. And you might tell me you've been struggling with weight gain. You're fatigued in the afternoon. You're wide awake at nighttime. Your workout performance is a struggle. You're not getting results and changing your body composition from what you're doing now. From a body perspective, it's actually, you're getting this response, exactly what your body's been programmed to do based on the information you're receiving or giving it. What I'm coming to understand, a different perspective, is why did the communication change? What signals has our body been receiving that led it to adapt this way? And this is what I wish I understood 15 years ago, in 2013, is a while ago. But once we understand the signal and the communication in our body, especially in middle age, we can start to begin to change the signals and help our metabolism respond differently. So when I do breath analysis, metabolism testing, we're actually measuring how your body consumes oxygen and how it produces carbon dioxide. So when I do a resting metabolism test, you lay there on a table with a mask over your mouth and nose, and we are collecting data. How well are you breathing? What is going on with your metabolism at rest? And so we can collect this information and get a snapshot of how you are doing at that moment in time. Yes, we can get clues related to actual resting metabolic rate, but also whether your metabolism, your metabolic output, is higher or lower than predicted on your age, height, weight, gender. We can also look at how much oxygen your body is consuming, so taking in when you breathe in, and when you exhale, how much carbon dioxide are you producing? We can look at how are you able to depend on fat or carbohydrates at rest. What percentage of that fuel source are you using when you're just laying there on a table? I'm also looking at how frequently as well as how efficiently you are breathing. How much air are you moving? And whether your respiratory pattern appears calm, efficient, or is it restricted and stress-driven? So during a resting test, I can get a lot of information. And even better, if I can collect data when we take that in motion. Can we move as on a treadmill or bike, or put a backpack on you with a testing kit and hike up a hill? What happens in an active metabolism test? We can look at your aerobic efficiency, or how well your body uses oxygen to produce energy at lower intensities. So identifying that peak fat max and the metabolic crossover point, identifying your 5 training zones. Your fat burning capacity is at bottom of zone 2, top of zone 1, is how well can your body use stored fat as fuel during rest and lower intensity exercise. We also look at your carbohydrate burning capacity. How efficient is your body using carbohydrates for fuel and accessing those stored fuel in your liver and muscle at higher intensity effort? So zone 3, we start to increase carbohydrate usage as the top of zone 2, bottom 3 is your metabolic crossover point where carbohydrate usage increases, to zone 4, which is more high intensity interval training. And then zone 5 is your sprint interval training. So we can identify the switching of your fuel sources, the metabolic crossover point and the intensity level, all looking at where your body shifts from switching from fat to carbohydrates to the higher end, we're burning creatine phosphate for ATP in your sprint session, zone 5. I'm looking at your breathing response, how your respiratory system adapts to increased energy demands, including your breath rate and the depth. Heart rate response is something we look at your cardiovascular system, how it reacts to your exercise intensity, and how efficiently your heart supports oxygen delivery. And then we look at these LT1, LT2, looking at the points where exercise shifts from sustainable oxygen-based energy production to more intense efforts that rely on faster, less efficient energy systems. And then we look at your ability to increase oxygen utilization, and this can reflect how well your muscles and your mitochondria can take in that oxygen and use oxygen as the exercise intensity rises. So we should see that peak fat max, the metabolic crossover point, move to the right. And then I'm looking at your recovery. So once we reach your peak VO2, where you want to stop, your RPE's a 9 or a 10 out of a 10, we say, okay, you're done, you want to stop, and then we measure recovery. In that 2 to 3 minute recovery, I'm looking at how quickly does your body stabilize your breathing, your heart rate, your energy after that intense effort. So now I want to go into the next deeper level of what I see, these patterns. So I'm thinking of it as metabolic pattern analysis that I've created, looking at what the body is doing, but we don't always understand the why. When we look at test reports and look at lab testing, for example, a resting metabolism test, I started to see this in the past year. 2 people, their resting metabolism is lower than predicted. They are in their 30s, females. For example, these 2 gals I tested, they're busy moms. They work out with their trainer. They do walking. They're doing high rocks training. They're eating their protein. But what if one person's dieting for years, or they're skipping breakfast, they're doing a lot of fasting, they train intensely, they limit carbohydrates, and they're eating protein, but it's just not enough. And they don't sleep as well as they think. It's not restorative deep sleep. And they're also cold all the time. Then we see the client B, the other client is sedentary. They gradually are losing muscle. We see on their blood labs, they got insulin is elevated. They're struggling with central weight gain, and they're tired after eating. And this is a client that might exercise, but they're sitting all day. Maybe they are working out weekly, but the rest of the time they're sedentary. I would look at, they have both lower metabolic output. Their reports show information that their metabolism is slower than it should be for their age and their gender, but they don't have the same pattern. One client may be intentionally conserving energy because the body's getting the message that there's not enough energy available. The other client may have a pattern showing they have lost muscle and metabolic capacity that's needed to use energy effectively. So the people should not receive the same nutrition plan. These clients should not receive the same exercise prescription. They shouldn't fast for the same amount of time, and they don't need the same supplement program. This is why I do not interpret PNOE metabolism testing in isolation. I created the FutureYou blueprint where I connect the metabolism test to the person's complete story, looking at their history, their training, their sleep, their recovery, their stressors, their timeline. And then I use nutritional therapy signs and symptoms intake form, a 5-day food and mood log, maybe see where they are in their hormones, blood chemistry, stool test, microbiome. So I'm getting more of a personalized biological investigation. And this means we're stepping back from the idea that one lab value, one test result, one symptom is telling us the whole story. Instead, I want to teach you how we're looking at multiple systems and how they're interacting and influencing each other in real time. We are asking deeper questions about patterns, timing, relationships. How does your metabolism respond to the stress you give it? How does your body use the fuel throughout the day? And how your digestion supports or limits nutrient absorption. So you're not just what you eat, but how you can break that food down and get the nutrients from the food as well as absorb it. And really, what I find most people is the clue of how your nervous system is working and responding. Really, I'm not chasing one abnormal number. And an abnormal number is just a clue. It's telling us something is out of balance. But one out of range number, a few different ones, does not explain why. Why is there an imbalance? Why does it exist? How long has this been happening? How long has it been developing? So if we only focus on correcting the number without understanding the underlying drivers, then we risk applying short-term fixes that do not create a lasting change. We are then needing to focus on decoding a person's biological communication network is what I'm finding myself doing. I'm identifying where the signals might be getting distorted, delayed, amplified across all the systems because the body works together to create metabolic harmony. But what's holding us back? Whether it's between the brain and the metabolism, the gut, the immune system, the hormones, the energy, the mitochondria. But what we need to do is understand how these signals all connect. Then we can begin to restore clarity and communication so the body can do what it's supposed to do. Respond, adapt, and regulate more effectively over time so it can be more resilient. So let's absorb that. And we'll follow up with, is fat burning, being fat adapted, the solution to improving our body composition? Sorry about the recording. I just realized my microphone was disconnected again. So I will apologize about that now. But I wanted to continue on about this information we are becoming aware of, the communication in our body. Something I learned years ago that is finally kind of coming together is too much of anything causes imbalance. Too little of anything causes deficiencies. But one of the common areas I found hard to wrap my head around is why high fat burning is not always good. As we started this podcast in 2012, talking about metabolic efficiency, being fat adapted, doing endurance training your body to burn fat at a high level. As an endurance athlete doing triathlons and marathons and long distance cycling events, trail running, I focused on getting that heart rate up higher that I can burn the most fat. So metabolic efficiency, that metabolic crossover point as high as we can where we're burning the most fat. And this is something I'm trying to understand for years of training and being low carb, being fat adapted endurance athlete. I always believed I was doing everything right because I felt great. I could go long distance. I can do really well in Ironmans on the bike and keeping my heart rate down and going fast, having good power output, and then run a marathon feeling great. And I was focused on metabolic efficiency. I taught my body how to burn fat. I minimized carbohydrates and put them around the workouts when I need them, more so now as I do shorter workouts and add more intensity as I get older and less long, slow distance type of zone 2. And I worked on improving my endurance capacity. And when I saw data showing I was burning high fat at rest and during exercise, my metabolic crossover point, as I said, was up to 160 heart rate back in the day, I felt it was a confirmation that the strategy is working. But as I get older, we learn that in middle age and in females, middle age, with their hormones changing, we need to do something different. And when we do a metabolism test, as I do now, shows that the client is burning a high percentage of fat at rest, we assume this is excellent. This is what we're trying to do, ideal. Now, yes, that's great. But what I'm learning is that the Goldilocks effect for everything, this can tell us, do you have a strong mitochondria function? Do you have healthy metabolic flexibility? But what has taken me time to understand is that the body does not just burn fat because it is optimized. It may also burn fat, light bulb, because it has limited access to anything else. In other words, the body is incredibly adaptive. We keep hearing about the word adapt. And if carbohydrate availability is consistently low, whether from chronic dieting, prolonged fasting, very ketogenic diet, low carb, and under fueling, as I was doing for years, because I was moving around all day, training, working, doing my workouts at low heart rate and not eating many calories. I wasn't eating much carbohydrates. It will shift us into using fat as a primary fuel source simply because that is what is available. That sounds right? Optimal. We want efficient fat burning on a report, but as we continue to do that longer in life and we enter middle age, this might actually reflect a survival-based adaptation rather than a sign of metabolic strength. And this is something I'm figuring out this past year, because I always have in my head, as you intuitively think, being efficient fat burner is ideal, right? Why would we want to be not burning a lot of fat? Well, over time, this can lead to a reduction in our glycogen stores, and this can impair our ability to access quick energy when needed, right? So it's metabolic flexibility. As I talk about the vagus nerve, we should be parasympathetic state, but we still need to be shift to the sympathetic and then back to parasympathetic. Fat burning, shift to carbohydrate burning, and back to fat. But if we lead to, as I just said, a reduction in glycogen stores, and then do we have an impairment in the ability to access this quick energy, the kindling for the fire to burn as needed? Do we get a decrease in the capacity to perform higher intensity exercise? So if you are doing sprint interval training, zone 5 to zone 1, if you're doing VO2 max workouts, people call it, or HIIT training, that is 1 to 4 minute pieces, and then back to zone 1, then a 4-minute piece up in that zone 4, are we able to burn carbohydrates? Or do you struggle at higher intensities because your body is shifting to conservation mode? Think of this, as I say all the time, this cellular low battery mode, or as I've learned for years in trying to put this all together, cell danger response. When survival becomes a priority, our body begins to conserve resources, slow down these non-essential functions, and limit our energy output. While this might help protect your system in the short term. Remember, acute stress versus chronic stress. And we want to find that Goldilocks effect. What is the right amount that creates the optimal results? This could reduce the body's ability to respond dynamically when higher energy demands arise. So this is why context matters so much. We have to ask not just what fuel the body is using, but why is it using it? And whether that pattern reflects resiliency. My word of the year, resiliency. I always come back to it. And flexibility, as we talked about, or compensation and constraint. In that case, if our body is not thriving, it is adapting to a perceived lack of available fuel. And Dan Feldman said this years ago on a podcast, and he was talking about metabolic health, metabolic flexibility, and finally it clicks. As I do metabolism testing, I can see it on the data. It makes sense when I can see the data. If we are choosing fat for our main fuel source because it has to, and that's not related to full flexibility, that our body's not flexible. And distinction is everything. The body may be using fat because carbohydrates available are not around. The availability of carbohydrates is limited. And that does not necessarily mean the body is thriving, as I used to have in my head, that the more fat I can burn, the healthier I am. But what if I'm sending the signal to my body that it needs to just survive? It needs to conserve. So if an individual, maybe yourself, is struggling to increase their energy production during exercise, you might feel and see fatigue early on. We might look at your full blood chemistry panel and see a low thyroid output. We may be seeing you struggling to build muscle. And this is where I come up with these patterns I've identified. What if you're not having strong muscles? You are doing everything right that you think, but you're doing too much of something and not enough of the other. We need to identify those limitations. What's holding you back that you're doing too much of to being your best self? What if you're always feeling cold? You always feel pretty depleted and your hormones just are suppressed. The goal in our head, it's opposite. It's not simply to burn more fat. The goal is being able to use the appropriate fuel at the appropriate time. And this is why I love to do testing and work with the client and get a good timeline, history, journal of what they're doing now and what they have been doing and what are their signs and symptoms when I give them the intake forms. When we are at rest and we have exercising at lower intensities, yes, we want the capacity to oxidize fat. That's your zone 2, zone 1 and zone 2 training. Above zone 2, we have that metabolic crossover point where carbohydrate usage goes up. So as exercise intensity increases, we also need the ability to access and use carbohydrates, stored fuel source in our muscle and liver, efficiently. So using that muscle fuel is important when we need to work at a higher intensity and then hopefully recover or do it again. So this is the ability to transition between fuels as we look at your 5 heart rate training zones. This is what we talk about metabolic flexibility. And it is a sign of the communication and how well your body can adapt. As I got deeper into this rabbit hole, interpreting the data from different clients, I started to recognize reoccurring patterns that led me down this investigation of what the heck is going on. Why are these people telling me they're doing all the right things, but they are not getting the desired results? This is not a medical diagnosis. This is not a rigid label. They're just communication patterns that can help us organize the clues and decide what the body may need first. Now, a person might express one dominant pattern, or often I see more a combination of several patterns. So I've created 5 patterns that I see commonly from lab testing and assessing the client. Sympathetic dominance, AMPK dominance, low mTOR or low AMPK, and then the combination pattern, metabolic chaos. So let's briefly walk through each one and watch my YouTube videos for short videos on each pattern. Now, think of pattern 1 as sympathetic dominance is wired, you're stressed, and you have an overactivated metabolism. Sympathetic dominance. This is a person whose body appears to be operating in the persistent state of urgency. Remember, the sympathetic nervous system is not bad, right? We need it. Same with glucose, insulin. It's not saying anything's good and bad. It's that Goldilocks effect, the right amount, the right time, flexibility. So we do need sympathetic nervous system to respond. It helps us respond to challenges, increases alertness, to mobilize energy quickly, and to perform our best when needed to react immediately. But the problem occurs when the body does not know how to turn off that response. The person that may be receiving continuous signals of threat from psychological stress, blood sugar instability, pain, digestive dysfunction, excessive training, under recovery, stimulant use, hormone changes, or simply what I see in myself when I look back, simply never slowing down. As I wrote my book, life is not a race, it is a journey. So when I do PNOE resting metabolism tests, I can even notice clues of sympathetic dominance, such as elevated breathing frequency, excessive ventilation, higher carbohydrate use at rest. So we see reduction in the fat oxidation. And really, I see people struggling to get into a truly restful state. So during the exercise component of the metabolism test, breathing and heart rate, we can see rise quickly. From the beginning of the warm-up, I see them just go right into carbohydrate fuel source earlier than expected. They might be walking and they're burning too many carbohydrates. And recovery between stages may be limited if we did an interval workout. Post reaching their VO2 max or VO2 peak, I'll measure their recovery. How fast do they come down? So I can see challenges, areas of opportunity, and they might have a high output initially, but crash later. Now, translate this into daily life. This person, that sympathetic dominance, describes themselves wired but tired. They probably have anxiety, racing thoughts, shallow breathing in the daytime, nighttime. They have poor sleep, early morning waking. They can have cravings, caffeine dependence, palpitations, low heart rate variability, digestion issues, under stress, or really the inability to take a rest day. Now, this sympathetic dominant person may continue to try to solve the problem by training harder. I'm going to fast longer. I'm going to eat less and restrict myself of nutrient-dense foods. Those strategies may work for some, but other people that are already stressed out system, this is sending a signal that's already stressed out. It's giving them even a stronger threat signal. So the primary objective is not to force greater output, but it's to restore the body's ability to shift between activation and recovery. Now, this might involve improving nervous system regulation, breathing efficiency, sleep, blood sugar stability, nutrition, your digestion, your recovery capacity. So before we ask the body to perform more, we need it to feel safe first, right? This is where I find myself working with a lot of clients. Originally, we did lab testing right away, but now I feel that let's just kind of hang out in this zone for a little bit until we start to see your numbers on your Oura ring, your Whoop, get stronger heart rate variability, increased restorative deep sleep, and more. Let's move on to pattern number 2. Are you in a survival and energy conservation mode? Is your metabolism slowing down for various reasons? I find the second pattern is commonly seen called AMPK dominance. And this is what I was talking about in the beginning of the episode. Yes, AMPK is one of the body's major energy sensors. AMPK pathway is activated in opposition of mTOR pathway when the body detects energy availability is low. Of course, the body's innate intelligence knows how to respond to the signals we're sending. An appropriate AMPK activation can, of course, be beneficial. This is why we got into fasting to increase cell autophagy, mitochondria biogenesis, cellular repair, improve fat oxidation, and glucose uptake. But our tendency as high performers is to thrive on more is better. If something's good for me, I need to do this more often. That is why one of my mantras is more is not always better. Sometimes less is more. When the body perceives ongoing signals of energy scarcity, AMPK pathway related signaling may remain elevated for too long. And the result, the body becomes very efficient at not burning fat, but surviving. And it may reduce your metabolic output. Our body becomes less willing to build. Remember, I've done a lot of videos on my YouTube channel, mTOR versus AMPK. We need both. If we're always in one system versus the other, they're designed for a reason. We need both. We don't want to limit muscle growth. Cancer growth, yes, but that doesn't mean not ever get into mTOR. If we are suppressing our reproductive hormones, as I've shared, I never was able to get pregnant when I was experiencing metabolic chaos, as thyroid conversion is often an issue as well. Decreased in recovery and additional training stress. So when I do a PNOE metabolism test at rest, what I may see if this client is in this AMPK dominance, they may appear as lower than expected metabolic rate, lower oxygen consumption, but high fat oxidation at rest, perhaps limited carbohydrate use, an overall picture of energy conservation. We are trained to think burning more fat is better. But remember, we talked about how we need the right amount. We need flexibility. When I am doing an active metabolism test, say on a bike or a treadmill, the person may struggle to increase output appropriately when I increase their speed every 1 to 2 minutes, depending on our protocol. We may do a step test or a ramp test. Sometimes we can do a 4 minutes per stage and not go to VO2 max, but go to their RQ changes higher levels. Now, their VO2 max response may be limited because the person is struggling to increase output as the intensity goes up. So they may fatigue early and they may struggle to access carbohydrate when the exercise intensity rises. And result, the exercise may feel much harder than it should. And this is when I look at someone's history, chronic dieting, excessive fasting, long-term low-carb eating, excessive endurance exercise training and racing, inadequate protein intake, and or underfueling relative to the activity. This describes me. After I had adrenal exhaustion, whatever you call it, in 2013, then I got into a little bit more fasting. And so I continued to get my body to feel it needed to conserve energy. Your symptoms may be feeling cold all the time, fatigue, unable to gain muscle, unable to recover, low libido, hormones in chaos. And we become frustrated because this is what I keep seeing and saying. The client is doing everything they have been told to do based on social media, podcasts, TikTok, Reels, whatever they're watching and listening to. This is healthy. This is what they need to do. This individual believes the answer is to eat less and exercise more. But instead, their body may already be receiving a powerful signal that there's not enough energy available. And this pattern I've been finding to be more common, especially combined with sympathetic dominance, is they're not needing another fasting protocol, calorie deficit, high intensity training block. This all may just backfire and cause more issues. The goal for this client may be, it's dependent on each client, it's different, but to restore their energy availability, nutrient sufficiency, thyroid and hormone communication, and digestion capacity, biological safety. Sometimes the path to a more responsive metabolism begins by providing more of the right resources, not taking more away. All right. The third pattern I see very often, the underbuilding and anabolic resistance. Often we experience this in middle age, especially as females. We have low mTOR. mTOR you can learn about in my video podcasts I did a few months ago. It's a nutrient and growth sensing pathway. And when I dove into this AMPK versus mTOR and then look at peptides and looking at what changes as we age, this is how I came about thinking a different approach is the communication systems in our body. As mTOR's growth, nutrient and growth sensing pathway involved in muscle protein synthesis, tissue repair, bone remodeling, mitochondria adaptation and recovery. So don't you read that or hear that and go, this is what I need to deal with a little bit more focus and attention on stimulating mTOR in middle age to improve my future self. A nutrient and growth sensing pathway. Similar to AMPK, mTOR is not simply good or bad. Once again, we need periods of breakdown, recycling, and repair. We also need periods of growth and rebuilding. Once we create the ideal FutureYou blueprint, we need to visualize how you're going to be living life in 5, 10, 20, 30 years. What does it take for you to improve how you age? As healthy aging requires the ability to move between these states, growth, rebuilding, breakdown, recycle, repair. And this, we might find changes as we age because we get low mTOR signaling often in middle age because the body is no longer responding adequately to the signals. So think communication systems in the body. We need the right signal to build and maintain tissue. And as we get older, menopause, low testosterone, inadequate protein intake, low leucine intake within those all other essential amino acids. And then we have chronic calorie restriction, inactivity, even if you're working out every morning or sitting the rest of the day. How about inflammation, poor digestion because you don't have enough stomach acid and digest enzymes, bile flow, and then insufficient amount of appropriate resistance training. When I do PNOE metabolism testing, this client with low mTOR, I can see signs and symptoms of correlations to low resting metabolism on their lab test. And look at their body composition, reduction in lean mass. Maybe you do a DEXA scan. This client may have lower oxygen consumption, limited metabolic reserve, energy capacity, and we would see poor recovery on their metabolism test at low intensities as we do on a treadmill or bike and take the intensity up every few minutes. Now, in daily life, this client may notice muscle loss, weakness or loss of strength, difficulty gaining muscle, struggle with recovery from their workout sessions, maybe not feeling hungry, they have low appetite, their bone density is decreased, or a history of doing a large amount of cardio without enough focus on resistance training. And I would add to that, resistance training, a lot of people say they do it, but they're doing so much cardio, it is out of balance. And they're not doing enough heavy weights to create the right stimulus. They're still doing the 10, 12, 15 repetitions to 20 repetitions, expecting results that used to work for them when they're younger. As we get older, I see this low mTOR pattern more often, and it's an issue because muscle is not something we just build to look good for appearance. If you follow Dr. Gabrielle Lyon and follow her information and the podcasts I've done and videos, muscle is a metabolic and endocrine hormone organ. Muscle helps us dispose glucose we dispose glucose from our blood to the muscles, that suitcase. We can put more clothes into our suitcase, Dr. Gabrielle talks about. Insulin sensitivity, mitochondrial capacity. More muscle you have, the higher resting metabolic rate you have. The more muscle you can have can help protect your bones and your joints. And communication can be improved with the rest of the body via what the muscles release, a hormone called myokines. When we lose muscle, we lose part of our metabolic communication network. The solution is what social media is telling you right now: eat more protein. But what I ask my clients when I'm starting with them, are you digesting that protein right? Are you able to absorb it? Is it the right type of protein that will stimulate muscle protein synthesis? Is it the right dose? Are you consuming enough total energy? Are they reaching an effective amino acid leucine threshold? Do they have enough hormones on board to respond? What does their workout program look like? The type of resistance training? And what does their recovery session look like in between sessions? Protein provides the signal. Resistant training provides the stimulus. But the terrain determines whether the body can respond. So we need to look at each client individually and understand, are you doing all the right things to get the desired results to improve how you age? The terrain determines whether the body can respond. Remember, terrain refers to your overall internal environment, thinking about hormone balance, nutrient status, digestion, sleep, your stress, recovery. Even if you have the right signal from protein and the right stimulus with the training you are doing, your body will not effectively build muscle unless your internal conditions support that process. So we need to make sure we are feeling safe and understand what that is going to look like for you is different. So we need to work with a practitioner as myself that can help figure out what that looks like for your life, your world. If your hormones are out of balance and nutrients aren't absorbed, you have stress, poor sleep, interfering with recovery, the body's not going to prioritize muscle. Instead, remember, the body will be focusing on conserving energy or managing your stress, which limits your ability to see results from all your efforts. And I see this all the time. All right, moving on to metabolic inflexible pattern. The fourth pattern is low AMPK. This is different from the energy conservation pattern. Now, this client, I may not see their body activating its energy sensor. Remember, AMPK is energy sensing. Mitochondria pathways are effective when the demand changes. If a person is struggling to increase your fat oxidation, their insulin sensitivity, creating new mitochondria, if they cannot clear excess glucose, They struggle to move between different fuel sources as we do the exercise test. In the resting metabolism test, we may show a greater carbohydrate dependence without doing anything, lower fat oxidation, limited fuel flexibility. During exercise, that person may shift towards carbohydrates early on and have a narrow fat burning range. Now, they also might have a limited aerobic capacity, poor energy or exercise economy, and they might show difficulty recovering from more intense efforts. Now, in their daily life, I can see this pattern when I do their analysis, looking at central fat weight gain, frequent hunger, cravings, post-meal fatigue, insulin resistance, low daily movement, poor sleep, inflammation, and of course, low muscle mass, and maybe too much of a sedentary lifestyle. Then if I look at their blood chemistry panel in optimal ranges and make sure we're getting all the markers we want to see in functional medicine, looking at insulin, glucose, triglycerides, looking at the liver health markers, inflammation markers, and even we're a CGM, looking at their blood sugar variability. Remember, I'm looking at patterns, not one marker. We are connecting multiple layers. If the person, this client, may benefit from interventions to improve muscle glucose disposal, mitochondria activation, daily movement, insulin, all this stuff, remember, sequence matters. We're not trying to do everything at once. We don't automatically prescribe intense fasting or say exercise session because someone has poor glucose regulation. We need to understand that client's unique situation. What's going on with their nervous system, their muscle mass, their energy availability, their sleep routine, their recovery routine. So the right challenge must be given to a body that can adapt to it. Finally, we get to pattern 5, where I think a lot of people might find themselves in, a combination pattern. Think of this as metabolic chaos, as we say as FDN practitioners, a stacked signal metabolism. I see this more frequently in people that have long, complex health histories as myself. Combination pattern occurs when several communication problems are happening at the same time. A person may begin with sympathetic dominance from chronic stress, overtraining, poor sleep, blood sugar instability, all of the above, but they continue on living life as a race. And then over time, the body starts to compensate, puts a brakes on the metabolism, reduces thyroid signaling, and conserve energy into cell danger response. Our muscles start to decline, muscle health. Insulin sensitivity decreases. Digestion function becomes impaired. Inflammation goes up. Eventually, the person can show features of sympathetic dominance, plus AMPK dominance, and low mTOR and low AMPK all at once. So their results may look mixed, and they may have low resting metabolic rate, but elevated resting ventilation. They may show a high percentage of fat at rest, but poor exercise output. I might see them depend heavily on carbohydrates, but they also have low muscle mass. They have poor metabolic flexibility and a low VO2. They probably fatigue early on the test when we do a treadmill or active test, and looking at the recovery takes a lot longer. This client often tells me they've tried everything. They tried fasting, they tried ketogenic diet, low fat, high carb, this diet, that diet. They changed their workouts, they did more cardio, more intervals, they took more supplements, they got some hormones, they did different detox cleanses, they experimented with peptides, they did the cold plunge and saunas, they did the red light, they did any new intervention that becomes an attempt to force change. But years of experience and working with people, I'm seeing they may not need more interventions. They need the right intervention in the right sequence. I call order of operations. So the most advanced protocol in the world will not work well if the foundational communication network cannot respond to it. Order matters, sequence matters. And this is an important lesson I want to share with you and help you walk away from this episode understanding strategy is important, and it's different for everybody. The same strategy can help one person and make someone else feel worse. Fasting may help someone with insulin resistance and low AMPK, but it's worse for the person's already underfueled, conserving energy, losing muscle, struggling with low thyroid signaling. High-intensity interval training may stimulate mitochondria adaptation in somebody, but for another client, it may further cause more metabolic chaos if they're living in sympathetic dominance. A low-carb plan may work if they need to improve glucose control, but for someone else, a low-carb plan may make their sleep more chaotic, less thyroid communication. Energy availability can be a problem. Exercise performance can be worsened in a depleted athlete. More exercise may help a sedentary person, but for someone who is already challenged with recovery, it might not work. If someone's trying to cut back on calories because they see on the report how many calories you need a day, so they cut back on calories, it might work when excessive intake's the problem. But for someone else, calorie restriction will suppress their metabolism if they've been chronically restricting their calorie intake for years. This is why generic health advice creates so much confusion. And it's such a frustration for me to observe what's going on in our industry on social media and just listening and observing people. Fasting is good. Carbs are bad. High intensity VO2 max training boosts your metabolism. Eat less, move more, burn more fat. But biology doesn't respond to different slogans and trends. It responds to context. I want you to remember the question is the intervention healthy? If that's not what we're thinking about. I want you to restate that question to yourself. Is this the right signal for me? Is this the pattern and the stage of my journey that I need to be in? So we need to investigate what is best for you, the unique individual. Because after I review someone's test results, I begin to connect the results to the person's real life. Let's look at their timeline. When did their symptoms begin? What happened before they showed up? Was there an infection, a surgery, major stressor, traumatic event, hormone transition, a period of excessive training? Maybe they were doing a lot of races. Have they spent years dieting? How was their experience fasting or skipping meals? Are they eating enough protein at the right time, evenly distributed? Are they fueling around their exercise? Are they afraid to eat carbohydrates coming from nature? Are they drinking water from the tap, or is it filtered? Are they having minerals in their water, electrolytes, caffeine? There's so much information we need to look at. But really looking at what does the gut microbiome suggest? What does their signs and symptoms say? It's a whole rabbit hole, but it's not about collecting the greatest number of tests, how many supplements we need to give you. I'd rather start by identifying the most meaningful patterns and determining where to begin. And that's why I feel that we need to look at the whole person and look at the communication in your system, in your body. Looking at your flow, your blood flow, your bile flow, looking at your lymphatic flow, look at your drainage pathways. Genetics can give us information. It may show us something that you're more vulnerable to, and then the PNOE and other tests can help show the body how it's functioning and adapting today. We're looking at how's the body expressing itself, the environment, nutrition, stress, sleep, movement, hormones. Your genetic tendencies become louder and which are starting to be more quiet. I love to create the FutureYou blueprint for clients once we understand their dominant metabolic pattern. I think of starting with first stage is restore. What do we need to restore first for this client? The foundational communication. Working on the flow foundation, the nervous system, supporting the vagus nerve, waste removal, bile flow, nitric oxide signaling. Then we move to replenish. restore what may be missing. Protein, essential aminos, minerals, electrolytes, digestive support, butyrate, fats, vitamins, minerals, mitochondria support. We progress gradually to rebuilding. We rebuild muscle, your mitochondria, hormone communication, digestion in time. Then we work on rebalancing the body. And then finally, we reignite performance, metabolic health, strength, healthy aging, purpose, long-term adaptability. This does not mean everyone follows an identical protocol, not at all. It's a framework that provides the roadmap for the client. Individual patterns determine the entry point, the priorities, the pace, and the sequence. We can add in advanced therapies later on, but advanced intervention should not be used to bypass foundational biology, as throwing in the peptides. Foundations are not basic because they are unimportant. They are foundational because everything else depends on them. Which pattern do you think you're in? If you recognize yourself in one or more of these descriptions, you may feel wired but tired, constantly cold, exhausted, despite eating little. You've lost muscle and can't regain it. Maybe you struggle with blood sugar, central fat gain. Maybe your history feels that it's a combination of everything we went over today. But your symptoms alone cannot determine your pattern. And an online quiz cannot fully decode your metabolic communication network. This is why we test and not guess. Using something as PNOE gives us a window into your current snapshot of your metabolic physiology. The health history gives us a timeline. Your food and mood log reveals daily signals that you are sending. And your nutritional assessment questionnaire, it helps me identify functional patterns. We can do body composition to reveal the role of your muscle and fat distribution, your lean body mass versus fat mass. And then we can always add targeted functional labs to help us understand why the pattern developed or why it continues. So it's not about ordering every test available. It's about collecting the right clues and connecting them in the important, correct sequence. So wrapping up this really long episode today, I just put it all at once, so don't listen to it all at once. Do little 20-minute listen 20 minutes at a time. That your metabolism is not simply a calorie burning machine. Think of it as an adaptive communication network, constantly asking, is there enough energy? Am I safe? Should I build? Should I burn? Should I store? Conserve? Do I repair? Can I recover? Can I tolerate this stress? The goal is to understand why communication changed and to restore the signals that allow your body to adapt again. Because a resilient metabolism is not one that's always burning the greatest amount of fat. It is one that can use the right fuel at the right time, which is S-Fuel's slogan, right fuel, right time. And you can respond to the appropriate challenge at hand. And then you can recover and bounce back from that stressor. And then you can build muscle. You can get energy from your mitochondria and then return to your baseline. The goal is to remain adaptable as we age. That's the difference between chasing a number and creating the FutureYou blueprint. If you feel that you're eating well, you're motivated, you're exercising, but you're still struggling getting the results. You have fatigue, poor recovery, stubborn weight gain, struggle with sleep, muscle loss, your performance is downhill, we can schedule a resting and active metabolism test to help identify your metabolism. What is it telling you right now? Then I do my metabolic pattern analysis, and I connect a breath analysis data with your health history, your nutrition, your symptoms, your lifestyle recovery, and when appropriate, functional lab findings. If you want to learn more about working with me and schedule your test in Solana Beach, Del Mar area, North San Diego, head to debbiepotts.net, send me a message, set a discovery call to learn more. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Coach Debbie Potts, for more episodes of the FutureYou Blueprint educational series. Remember, your metabolism may not is not broken. We may just not be responding to the signals you are giving it, or rather, responding to the signals you are sending your body and it's receiving it. Stress, conservation, danger. The goal, remember, is to identify where you are today, and we meet you on that journey. Course correct once we identify the pattern and we restore your communication and create the conditions that allow your unique body to adapt again. So we want to restore communication, build resilience so we can create your future you. Remember, life is not a race, it is a journey. And your journey begins by learning how to listen to the language of your own biology. So thanks for listening to this whole episode. I know it was super long. I had to take 3 breaks to do it, but I just wanted to put it all into one episode. And I look forward to hearing from you. Schedule a free discovery call with me off the website and hit subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel. And please share this and give us a review. I'd love to get this information out there because I don't think enough people are talking about it. So let's connect, and I'm happy you are taking ownership of yourself today to be your best version of yourself tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Coach Debbie Pod Show. If today's episode sparked a light bulb moment, that's your sign to stop guessing and start building your personalized Future You blueprint. You can learn more or book a discovery call at www.debbiepotts.net. Be sure to follow the show on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search Coach Debbie Potts. 2 T's. If this episode helped you, please subscribe, rate, and review. It's how we help more people age with strength, energy, and clarity. Until next time, remember, age is inevitable. How you age is not.